It's too bad. I keep on getting messages that the little selfie ask you to take first before you go live. It doesn't upload sometimes. It's too bad. I'm bugging some great expressions, just nice smiles and stuff. So I'm back on the off of geopolitics now. Back onto the Hiawatha crater subject. The Hiawatha impact, which we now know can be dated exactly to 12,800 BC, or as accurately as geologists date things. You do, and geoastronomy is it called when there's a meteor impact? There's a certain name for the field. Sidereal refers to the stellar map, and the sky is sidereal. Like sidereal navigation means to go by the sky. The sidereal plane is the surface of the sky, the apparent sphere as it appeared to the ancient of the firmament. And the firmament lay behind the stars. It was the substance of the universe, through which the waters of the flood came. So, anyways, I titled this to NASA Goddard. Okay, you guys, and I hope some of you guys managed to watch this. I wrote you that crazy letter a couple of months ago, and I've commented on you in some of my other videos, and tried to remember to tag you. I haven't done all my tags on my recent YouTubes yet, but please go listen to what I'm saying. I know the title puts you off because it's associated with all the mythical stuff, what you think is pseudoscience, which I agree is treated in a pseudoscientific way. There's not a lot of logic operating, but there's one hell of a lot of evidence and some very plausible arguments. So even this video I was just watching, which I'm sorry I forgot to note the fellow's name, but it was one, I went down the page on a search on the Kolbrin, and it was on. He got off on. He started off with the usual things about how science doesn't appreciate people who know things like him. So we all feel like that. I sure feel like that. I'm just kind of reckoned with it after 63 years, knowing more than the academic system and not fitting inside it, because it can't hold people like me. Yeah, so that's why I'm the young professor. But I'm the young bullet, but not 7-Up. I'm not sweeter either. I don't claim to have the brutal truth. I'm just kind of really abstractly logical and know what I've read and how it fits together and how it would fit together and how it must fit together. With the ecohistory or the past ecohistory of the planet and of humanity is now, we can date, the thing is now, because of NASA Goddard, please listen, okay, because of the Kolbrin. If you guys want to try and verify it, go ahead. And there's hundreds of scrolls missing. And it has this alternate story. And it has, including Egyptian materials and also Celtic materials that tell a different account of the apostles coming to England from, guess where? Armenia. Where's that? Just north of Palestine. Else is that? That's where Haran is, in the Temple of the Seven Planets, and it's also where the Punics came out. We're related to so much of Egypt history, and also so much brought tin to the British Isles, or came to the British Isles for tin, and it was an important part of the bronze trade was getting tin, and this is why they were there, but not just Joseph of Arimathea. There's always this obsession with Jesus in the Western thought, right? But the Punics were there a long time already, and then things happened. They got pushed out of Iberia, then the Gauls got, either butchered, and many must have fled west across the sea, and certainly some must have come to the Isles, and so on. There was always good Western refugees, so I'm pretty certain there were. They didn't bring nations with them because they'd been harmed by nations, or the idea of what nations were, tribes and kings and wars and blood. People for fleeing and a religion that just like death, which is Christianity. And he raves on about the apocalypse or whatever, right? But they're going on about Islam was prophesied as being somewhere, not the Kolbrin, somewhere else. Maybe the Book of Enoch, I think it was, right? The Book of the Giants. No, it was prophesied to Enoch. I think that maybe it's Kolbrin, but no, it was Enoch. That there would be a religion come along that was all about talking about peace. It was all about war. Yeah, well, that's true of Islam. It is true of Islam, but it's also even more true of Christianity. It continues to be to this very day. How else do I explain the mounted police and now the Canadian military? Today comes out in a certain website that came out. There's Canadian military in Burns Lake and Smithers taking action. Action has been taken against the Unistoten and the Gittimnen. These are sovereign peoples. The UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People is being violated by armed force at the very moment that I'm speaking. This is the Canada I come from. It's one of the reasons I want out, not for fear of speaking about it, but I'm just tired about living around people who tolerate it. And all I can do is speak up about it. You know, so I'm doing that now to anybody who's listening to this. It's gotten this far, and that includes guys at NASA Goddard. Some of you must be First Nations or sorry, Native American, or Latin American, Hispanic American, or Black American. This is Standing Rock all over again, my friends. Okay, except it's hidden in the Canadian Northwest, hidden from view. There are no TV cameras. There aren't thousands of people. There might be, because there might be a rallying. There's people coming in on snowmobiles. It's a big deal. So anyway, let's get back to the Hiawatha impact. Because I want NASA Goddard to listen to me and Goddard. Now listen to this crazy hippie. I'm only at 5 minutes. I'm doing pretty good. I can go on for like a good hour and a half about stuff like this. But so I was listening to this new thing about the Kolbrin that I was just listening to. I'm listening to him again. And it says again, you know, that the world was first destroyed by fire. And then another thing from the sky came, and it was partially destroyed by water. And also by a bombardment of something else at the same time. He does the certain passages that he covers, you know, that he discusses. And I've heard this before, right? And it fits that pattern of the Hiawatha meteor, and then some other non-metallic, like didn't leave a meteor, but was some kind of fireball that smolted the Laurentian ice cap and let loose the Davis Strait ice dam for Lake Legacy. And what melted Lake Legacy anyway? Ice caps, once they're in place, they have a way of hanging on for, you know, for that size. They generate their own weather. That's how they advance. They generate their own storm fronts. I remember seeing on Geographic about it years ago. There was something about they could advance. The rate a glacier could advance that during an ice. It was frightening. I can't remember the numbers, so I don't embarrass myself by saying it. But it was high. It's like, whoa, you're faster than you could run, basically. Really? Okay, so a wall of ice coming at you like that? Okay, goodbye. You think a wave coming at you a mile high is bad news? Let's think about a wall of ice. So you the wall in the famous Game of Thrones? Yeah, think of one of those coming at you. Apparently, you know, but anyway, then all of a sudden they melted. All of a sudden it melted, and the seas came up by 100 meters. And also in the Kolbrin, it says, the way I've heard of passages, you know, it says about when it was destroyed by fire, that of course there would have been all great fires, and then there was also a great washing of the land also, you know, this kind of stuff, that there was worldwide devastation, right? What it's going to do to more than just Greenland. If you hit Greenland, you're going to, and then what's one of the lines? The lines, and the astronomers, please keep on listening, okay? Because there's a line in there that they're just misinterpreting the meaning, which is often the case with how people take wordings of how things are out of translated languages, right? But it said that the northern hemisphere was turned on its side. Now, what their meaning is, my friends, where the Milky Way was, meaning the sky was turned on its side. The northern sky was turned on its side. Nobody knew about the southern sky in those days. You know, like okay, so it doesn't mean that the planet's wobble was set off, except when this guy went on. Was I suggested that, and he remembers Velikovsky, and he started going into what Velikovsky had said. And there's another name that astronomers don't like to hear, but please do keep on looking. Okay, so and it's and logic very bizarre. I had thought it was to do with the collision, and it had to do with the other one was formed and where it is now. And sure enough, in the Kolbrin it says after that first collision, the moon wasn't there. But of course, it was back in the sky again by the time of the second collision, when the Greenland ice cap, where there must have been a second one. So somebody please go back to the ephemera, the tables of comets, and tell me if there was a comet in 6000 BC. And apparently had twin tails. It was a big one. It was in the sky. It had a big voice. It spoke. And what they didn't have to say, but it was a big giant thing making a lot of noise. So it was something in the sky that was, and people go, oh, it's alien spaceships. Well, yeah, alien spaceships. Okay, whatever. But it did change humanity, and it forced humanity apparently to collaborate, which is after the Hiawatha impact, which is, I believe, what motivated the building of Göbekli Tepe in the beginning of the star cults of Haran, where the survivors mentioned in the Kolbrin with geography suiting the Anti-Taurus and the Zagros and the Mesopotamian plan and all of that, right, is in there, that they had to retreat there from the rising of the waters. Well, where are those waters coming in from? Well, the rest of the Mediterranean basin down to the 200-meter level. So there should be a bigger search for what's down there, and maybe NASA should think about that too, all over the planet. right? But there's also the lower water level yet from the 12,100. So there was a lot of ice that melted and vaporized and rained and rained and rained and became ice. And I think the Younger Dryas was that when there was an ice cap advancing across into Ukraine and then pulled back out. Archaeum was founded just after that. Humanity advanced very closely right after the ice cap. Norse myth is built on it, with Ymir, the giant, being born out of the ice cap, licked out of the ice cap by how. The Voluspa needs a hardcore look at it. It's like somebody looking at their geohistory, what it means. The same as Greek lore and Egyptian. They look at it in geohistory. But he also, in the case of Velikovsky, you see, that I thought it was like talking about a collision between something I read it many years ago. I thought it had something to do with a collision between something from the asteroid belt and us that caused Venus to spin back direction. So I was with Mars and something happened with the moon. Of course, we all know that the moon was ripped out of the Pacific. We know about plate tectonics, and that was a long time ago. That was a long time before these comets. But these comets would have, especially the 12,100 one, was metallic, so a very hard hit. The megatonnage, I don't know. I'd have to look at what it would be, the size of the meteorite and the angle it hit. But it would have shocked the mantle. It would have sent shockwaves to the mantle. It would have caused earthquakes all over the planet. And fires, big fires at first, and then rain, more ice, rain. So the ice cap might have been going a little bit short for a short while, but it did freeze the mammoths, and it did wipe out the megafauna in North America, and I think in South America hang on for quite a bit. And people forget when they talk about the ice age. It's not like the whole planet was covered in ice. When you see time travel on Star Trek or any of those shows, and back into the past, or some magical gateway or technological gateway, Stargate, all that stuff. No. Not everything was ice. The tropics, and especially the lowlands of the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, which were warm and balmy, although the Mediterranean didn't have its ancient sea level, which was even lower, but there was a shoreline there, so there must have been the same kind of settlements that soon emerged afterwards. And there was a greater interest in why something had appeared in the sky that caused people to want, to need, to study the sky, and maybe appease it, maybe the Gobekli Tepe, but it got everybody to cooperate. But also in the Kolbrin, it says that after the first impact, once people came out of their caves, and out of the darkness and out of the fear, right, that they just fucked and killed and ate and drank and exploited. But then you have some kind of age of peace, the famous Golden Age, I think. Or maybe the Golden Age before the comet, I don't know. I'd have to think more about this. I'm calling Hiawatha a comet rather than a meteor. I guess it's probably officially a meteor. But the second comet. And so the Kolbrin guy goes on about the two suns. The difference between Helios and Shamash, Phaeton, Phaeton is the other one. There's two suns, and one of them appears to have been Saturn in the belief system of the Kolbrin, right? What is the Kolbrin? But it's also what Velikovsky said, that it was Saturn. Somehow it was Saturn that had been the sun, and the new sun is a new sun. Maybe we had been a moon of, maybe we had been, this is something that came to me while listening to this just now. Maybe we had been a moon of Saturn, which was closer in or something, and something that kind of collision happened. And the asteroid belt thing was, I think, is it that says that was von Däniken, that Velikovsky that said that had something to do with the disappearance of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th planet. And Jupiter is actually the 6th. Anyways, that's quite a crazy idea. But Velikovsky's notions and his descriptions of events and changes in the sky all suit the notion that we had collisions. We had planetary collisions. In other words, small planetoids, one mostly of water in 6,000 BC, or gases in 6,000 BC. Didn't change the atmosphere too much. So it was probably mostly water or heat, something very, very hot, or something that came by very hot and then left. A comet, a near miss maybe, and it just happened to graze Greenland. It just that was at its not aphelion, whatever it's called. Aphelion means close to the sun, or perihelion. So pericomet, the pericometic distance, as close to the comet as it got, just happened to be Greenland rather than Antarctica, in which case things would probably be a lot more water. Anyways, so that's why Doggerland's underwater, and I believe all the legends of Leoness and Avalon and all the other sunken countries of fame and legends, they all exist. And some of them are at the bottom of the Black Sea, and I'm sure I'll find it again, but I did hold it in my hands once. But maybe some say out there, or there's a Church of the Universal Man here, which I believe to be possible spin-off from the Saint Germain. So I'm mentioning things that far out acceptability inside, but I am a rational person. I just read everything, right? And they're all fitting together right now. It's because of the Hiawatha comet. I call it the Hiawatha comet because as an augurer, I would see that a meteor would be a smalling firefall, would be a firefall. And in the Kolbrin throughout, there are stories about what fell from the sky. So we have stories of bombardments dating to events that date to 12,800 BC. The historical clock of humanity has just been pushed back. The Kolbrin verifies itself because of the geoarchaeological, astronomical, geoastrological record of the impact and its effects. And then the different we know about the civilizations that existed before the flood, before 6000 BC. Now we know about Hiawatha. And I think Thrace arose because of the flood, because it was after, maybe it was before. I don't know what an island part of the Black Sea culture, but it seems Thrace. And there's this story in the Kolbrin that the Egyptians came from the Caucasus, which ties in by Hermes, who's from the quote Armenian area. When Armenia had a sea coast, it was Edessa, Antalya, that area, and the Alawite coast north of Lebanon, where Haran and Banlirfa and where Edessa and in Roman Emperor, was it Valerian or Valentinian, got captured by the Parthians and held captive in abject slavery for 30 years in Ctesiphon, right? The Romans didn't always get their way. Anyway, so it all went down there, right? But that was the center of Phoenician culture and where Carthage was born out of. Great Carthage, great Carthage and its great navies that Rome copied and claims to have invented them. All our historians talk about Roman triremes. Do they talk about Carthaginian triremes? Right, so the cultural imperialism that's being enacted in northern BC right now continues. They erase the history that came before them by saying it's invalid. In the Vancouver Sun today, I have had Facebook comments back and forth with some usual trolls, being the usual racist, white supremacist a-holes in the way it's put here in Canada, the same arguments. Oh, they're just drunk and they want to get more money for their welfare. You know what? Take off the welfare and comments like this, but they're coming in on snowmobile and there's resistance going on. We had armed resistance before in Canada at Oka. There were times there were reserves that were violently invaded by the RCMP before. The RCMP are not the nice guys on the postcards that you see on the Olympic ceremony standing with the Prime Minister. And they're not generally female, nor are they generally Aboriginal or immigrant, as they are often presented to the media when they're presented with politicians. They are overwhelmingly white. They're overwhelmingly known to be more than a bit racist, and there is a central issue behind the missing and murdered Indian woman's inquiry. These are the people that are advancing on the Unistote and get them done. And the Git-Kassam Wet'suwet'en Confederacy, which I hope European countries, I'm going to ask the Guardian to do this, to put the Git-Kassam Wet'suwet'en Confederacy and the other independent self-declared countries of the North American continent on the map. Because they exist under international law. They do. And even Canadian courts say so. And what is their pressure to do? Elect the government to change the courts. It's the same game as in the wilderness. This is their backyard. They'll fight to defend this. This is Northern Gateway Part 2. Northern Gateway, there was the same thing with Frida Huson at the Winnistoten Bridge, whatever the ridge is here. I think it's the Rice Ridge or the Ricetown Bridge, somewhere like that. It's near the highway. It's in traditional territory. She's a traditional chief, and the chief of the Gittimden is also there. And it's a hereditary clan system that's the foundation of a confederacy that's three times old as Canada, which the Crown never recognized. And there was maybe 20 Britons in the area, if there was even that many, who voted on the plebiscite to take away all their rights and claimed it was all Ottawa's problem now in 1871. Ooh, and the land has how many billions been taken out of it, and trees and minerals, and then the power projects that have ruined the rivers. The Nechako River fishery is gone because of the Nechako diversion of the Camano aluminum plant, which is owned by Alcoa, now owned by Rio Tinto. Anyways, let's not get into mining politics. It's dangerous. Those guys kill people. I'm serious. That's why I backed off about certain articles in Wikipedia. And when I realized who somebody I was talking to was or who he was connected to, I went, I'm just going to stop talking about this. But yeah, this is the kind of scale of things going on that this gets back to. It all ties together. You know, when I'm looking at these things, people go like, well, how's he going from the Hiawatha impact into modern British Columbia politics? Because the same prevailing lies that keep people from seeing the full picture prevail. The media doesn't help. And, you know, cross-border awareness is important. So I'm talking about this local history here for the benefit of the people at NASA Goddard. I hope you're still listening to this. I hope. About the Hiawatha impact, in my belief, there's a second comment, and they should start looking. And tell me, please, about the second shoreline, the lower shoreline. And it's really too bad we're all fighting with each other, this damn planet. You know, it really is too bad. It really is. You know, that there's so much that we could learn about the past that we have to learn, we should learn and need to learn before the seas rise and cover it all. Again. Before the seas rise and cover it all. Again. So how many ages of human history are there in the Hindu calendar, in the Hindu chronology? Too many to list. I don't even know them all. I mean, I've read Yugas a bit. I understand the Yugas a bit. They're gigantic in cycle. And there is a long-term belief that there is a civilization older on the planet, older than the ones we know, even older than the ones we know that came before the ones that are commonly accepted that we know. So even for the civilizations that were destroyed in 12,500 when the seas rose the first time, and there were great fires, and all the mammoths died, and all the great creatures of the earth disappeared. It's kind of mentioned in the Kolbrin too, although in the Book of Enoch, in the Book of Giants, they talk about them as monsters, sons of abominations created by the gods, you know, from screwing, fallen from heaven, screwing around with beasts and humans and stuff, right? Well, but yeah, saber-tooths and giant sloths and all the big beasties, you know, and the mammoths and the mastodons and stuff that just are there, well, you know, saber-tooth that might still be around the Coast Mountains, I think, or the Alaska Ranges. I actually think that. There are stories that suggest it. Consider that lower sea level that I'm talking about. First the 200-meter level and then the prior one for 12,800. And the East Siberian ice shelf, what's it covered in? It's covered in methane clothrates. You know what else I bet it's covered with? Mammoth and mastodon carcasses. We really got to start looking at the lowlands, you know, the Bering Sea, the famous landage. And like I say, I remember hearing about there being signs of a city in the lower Yukon, west of Fairbanks somewhere. I know that sounds crazy, but this was on CT radio. I heard it, you know, 1982 or so. I remember everything. Too much. There's a lot in here. There's a lot in here. And I start talking about it, a little ramble like this. I'm only doing 24 minutes. I'm doing not bad. Came in, I wanted to sing some songs, but I'm watching this guy while I was on the porch smoking my joint. I was listening to what's going on. Listen to that, okay? And so this is the more corroboration in Kolbrin. This is further passages and another guy explaining the detailed events again. It got me thinking about it. And then he launched off into the Velikovsky stuff, which I'd mentioned is maybe worth reconsidering. And Velikovsky may have had his astronomy wrong as to which planet caused what. But he talks about planetary collisions and things getting knocked out of place. And there's this bit about the orbit going from that point, there came this point, 1000 BC, they had to adjust the calendrical system for 360 days a year to 364, or the approximate 65 days a year. They had to do since that we were knocked off a bit, but because the impact, which you think of 12,800 impact, yeah, of course it would. That would knock the planet, not cause the mantle and cause huge waves and cause earthquakes all over the place, and a huge planetary albedo, you know, like maximum ice cover or cloud cover and rapid cooling and chilling until it settled. That's the younger dryas, and then it froze and then it thawed out again. You know, it did that, but it also. Where's my water? I'm trying to find my spot brain that I left that off at. that it did what it did, but there was some kind of prior, like they say, the legend of the golden age when people were taller and had a higher civilization. And sure enough, we find signs of things that we don't know how they were done. And I don't mean Göbekli Tepe. I mean the pre-dynastic Egypt stuff and the real purpose of those giant vaults under Hawara and those subterranean. They've done LiDAR into the ground there, you see, or whatever it's called. So whatever penetrating satellite radar or something they're using, the same thing that they're using from Newfoundland for trying the Viking stuff. But they found the cavities underneath Hawara, that there's these giant cavities there. What are they really for? Maybe it's labyrinth, maybe it is the famous labyrinth, which is supposed to be a pyramid somewhere. And Hawara is one of the pyramids, although not that one, not the one that was being referred to. So this is all like really apocryphal archaeology. It scares the pants off serious scientists. But because of what's in the Kolbrin, it really has me wondering what might be in the book of the Library of Hermes, if it exists, at the Temple of the Seven Planets in Haran. What might be in the Great Library of Herculaneum at the villa that was found. It was some Roman intellectual who had Latin and Greek classics and other books from all other cultures. His own little mini Alexandria, and it didn't get incinerated. It got christened as Larthy Copper Scroll kind of thing. And there's just nobody around who can speak Greek, who can enough ancient Greek to be able to translate it all or even know what's in it. And the same applies to a giant trove of scrolls found during the building of the Monastiraki Metro in Athens. Ancient Greek, NASA, still listening, right? You guys got to get some more ancient Greek scholars. I'm not one. I wish I was. I'd love to translate Pindar for the rest of my life. I really would. And Euripides and stuff. I'd live in Delphi and write poetry and just forget about all the trouble of the world and my knowledge of the ancient world and go live with the oracle and play my whistle to the god. That's what I'd rather do with my life. But I have an obligation to do the onus of the gift that has been laid on to me. I was told to give it. So that just doesn't include the gift of music. It includes the gift of knowing. And I'm not a prophet. I'm just somebody who's like a living record of everything he's read and known and sees things fall into place with a little Socratic kind of clarity. The logic of it all, Occam's razor applies. History is a detective story, and we're in the middle of the resolution. And so the resolution is coming out because of the revelations of the ancient past. And, it's no accident that the area of the world that where the origin of civilization, Western civilization, comes out of is, Haran and Chaldea and Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. This Fertile Crescent, everything I'm talking about with Haran is all Fertile Crescent, that it's connected to the culture that was in the bottom of the Black Sea and in the bottom of the Mediterranean. So the mammoths and the mastodons on the East Siberian ice shelf, it must be down there with the Clathrates. Must be. Because the sea raised and took them. Yeah. And down whatsoever in the Baltic, whatever's organic down there, we're going to stay down there. It's going to stay intact, like we found that ship. So they'll find bones and stuff for sure, down the bottom of it. But they might find stone structures like they have in Bulgaria and Romania and Georgia, that whole area. People forget. Everybody extols Stonehenge and Drogheda. Oh, the beautiful places. I'll go to. They're both tourist traps, I'm sure. Drogheda is a tourist trap. Maybe not much as Stonehenge is. We're right by a major highway. I'll find other henges to go play at. Other places like Karnak, go play at. I want to go to Donegal. I want to go to the places of my ancestors, including those in Ireland, and I want to go to Drogheda and visit Tara and so on. I want to go not to places of Yeats, but the places of Cahul and the tales of the bards, Finn McCool, and so on. But Drogheda and Stonehenge were built just after. Well, maybe not. 6000 BC. What is the date on the building of Stonehenge? What is the date on the building of Stonehenge? 6000 BC. So was it built when England was still in Ireland? But considering that it was built And considering the tales of Leoness, and it doesn't say it was a city exactly, but a land, and Avalon, which isn't the same as Camelot. No, some people think it is, but it's not. Camelot is from the Anglo-Saxon Celtic area of, after the Romans left. What was in the English Channel when the seas rose? What was in there? What was in there? Now the English Channel has been, currents have probably swept everything clean. That's fine. The sea swallows all things. She is our great mother. It's a line from Homer. And I really think that only an appreciation of the ancient stories, it really are descriptors, especially things from Homer and comments that he makes, which are poetic allusions to things that were understandings about the universe or the nature of the sea, that she is our great mother. She is where our life came from. She will swallow us all again, as she has before. And the fires will consume us again, as they have before. And humanity has endured and evolved and changed many times. And each time was when we're less than we were. But now we are not just less than we were, but there are too many of us. There are too many of us not for the planet to bear, but for our life systems that we rely on the planet to bear. So we are eating ourselves out of house and home, quite literally. And the banks are letting us do it because in the meantime, the banks and the rich get to live high off the hog and tell everybody else to live tight and lean so that they can be even richer. That's what austerity means. Everybody else be austere. Us, we get to get ourselves high salaries and great pensions because we're better than the rest of you. And we intend to survive this. We don't care who dies. And we don't care how many wars we start because of the consumer goods we require, which require often military operations to get them, or covert operations, or slavery. And the whole technology sector got issues with them. I just saw a thing about California's new governor having a thing about wage equity there. Because obviously Palo Alto has it's like Vancouver. On the one side of town, you got like the west end of Vancouver is one of the richest parts of North America. It's like they have a square mile that is the west end, plus a bit Cole Harbor and a little bit subjoining it, Stanley Park neighborhood, which is a little tiny area. And Yaletown, the rich areas. Yaletown used to be an industrial area. West End was founded it's become like a mini New York. It was designed to be, and it's become like a super wealthy area. Right next to it, and there's a dividing line on Abbott Street where the city meets east and west at the old Woods building. And it's like yuppie land this way, preppy land, hipster land that way to the west. And this way, it's the jungle of the East Hastings Strip. It's community East Hastings. It's our old skid road. It goes back to the mining and logging days when guys would come down winter winter with their money in the single room occupancy hotels, SRO, which are now warrens of drugs and violence and crime and filth. And this is where we make the poor in Canada live. I was actually told if I needed housing, that's the best social services could do for me if I was in the downtown east side. So that's why out here in Maple Ridge, it's a shared place, 700-800. So I'm moving to the canyon. But, it's the reality of the world. And that's fine. I'll go wherever I need to. Because I know who I am. I know why I'm here. And I know I can do this now. I know I can go, hey, world, Skookum One, the young professor, Mike Clevin. I'd rather be playing my music, okay? So when I do my Patreon, it's both to be this asshole politician that I'm winding up being without really wanting, a journalist or whatever, historian, whatever that I am, geopolitical analyst, pundit, whatever. I'm like a freelance pundit. They wouldn't put me on panel shows. They wouldn't put me on. I remember mentioning in my last vlog, I said something about Rex Murphy that I was talking about challenging CBC. Well, what it was about, look, CBC, if you give Rex Murphy his 3 minutes a week or something like that, what about this old Canadian out here in British Columbia who comes from the old stock too, let's call it that. And yeah, and is that what it takes to get heard in this country? And I'm not Aboriginal. I'm not from the right ethnic group to be on, there's a lot of, Ian, I laugh at the kids in the hall's nickname for Ian Handsome Man thing, Ian Handsome Man thing, or I can't remember the names of the various anchors in Vancouver and Seattle, where there's a deliberate intent to have ethnic mix, the same as they do when they put Mounties on the screen to represent authority. Authority in it with a face of diversity on it, when really it's not a face of diversity, it's a force of white supremacist fascism against the First Nations people of Canada, which is underway right now. Now, whether it's E Division in charge of this and who, They claim they're just, enacting the law, and they're not taking sides in the land claims. Well, I'll tell you what, you are just right away, sirs, because the law, the constitution of the country says that you need a right of consent to enter the land of the traditional chiefs, of the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en. You are violating the law by your actions. And this is, I'm saying this internationally too. I'm going to have to subtitle this. So I'm going to get my Russian friends, and I can do the French and Spanish myself. I'm going to ask my Russian friend to provide me subtitles, make this international. This needs to go to the world. Canada is a criminal state. British Columbia is a criminal state. The action, I'm not trying to sound radical here. I'm speaking as a sort of international lawyer who knows the material and who knows international law and the treaty law of the Pacific Northwest, including the imperial law of the Spanish and the Russians, and of the customary law of the First Nations. And I understand all this thanks to my friend Terry Glavin, whose book Death Feast at Din Muhammad is about this very confederacy that is older than Canada, and now is being invaded by Canadian paramilitary troops and military troops from other provinces without consent, to make arrests and to cut off communications. And what's our media saying about it? Well, saying they're just parroting the usual stuff and making the Mounties seem like good guys. But no, if you're doing that, you're not obeying the law. You're creating a law that doesn't exist, is what I'm saying to the RCMP. You are not doing what is legal. And I don't have the friends at the International Court of Justice or at the UN that I wish I did. And I don't have the law degree that perhaps it would alarm people. It would if I actually did. But you are doing something highly illegal under international law. Canada does not have a right to enforce its will on the people of Gitxsan, Wet'suwet'en Confederacy, or the hereditary chiefs, or the houses of the Gitxsan and the Unistoten. Do not. This is highly illegal. This is an invasion from Canada into one of the unsurrendered territories. This is an invasion of one of the unsurrendered nations of an area that proclaims itself British Columbia but has no right to do so. I'll let that one sit with you for a while, because that's the state of things. You don't have a right even to call it that. We should call it Free Columbia just as an interim name to get rid of that British tag. Because the Crown has no rights on the mainland other than a few tiny treaties. A few loose agreements that aren't treaties. You look at the Flatland Agreement, it's not a treaty. Do we have to spend how many billions in court before we recognize the legitimate rights of the First Nations of British Columbia to the fact that they are unsurrendered sovereign nations? Now, this is bigger than Standing Rock. In a way, it's bigger than Oka. I wonder how many military and cops there are, because then we compare the numbers to Oka. It was the size of the mobilized military. Our military were so cute. They were brought in as peacekeeping forces between the Mohawk Warriors, the Mohawk Warrior Society, and the State of Quebec, who had been called out by the fascist mayor of Oka, who wanted to expand his golf course by cutting down the trees people had been buried in. Oh, such a class act, Quebecers, such a class act. Anyways, somebody died. If people that don't know the story of the Oka crisis, people go look it up. It happened in 1990. It got upstaged by the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam. Canada hung on the edge of civil war, and Canadians supported the Mohawks outright, or the restoration of the Mohawk Confederacy. Myself, right here and now, I say that the Mohawk Confederacy needs to speak up about this. And I'm not a First Nations person. I'm just calling upon them as a Canadian who believes in them, believes they're right to exist, and the Kainai Nation, and the Ktunaxa, and the Slattery Nation. Of course, they're all doing this, and the media aren't covering it. I'm going to have to please go look at APTN for coverage of this. Do not watch CBC for coverage of this. Do not watch CTV, except as to keep an eye on the lies. Only watch the Monopoly Network, keep an eye on the lies. Make that your motto. I might have to make that a little button or something. I'm going to sell some of my slogan, right? Only watch the Monopoly media to keep your eyes on the lies. This is digital TNN, men. We have to break down the media wall around truth in Canada, the granite curtain that keeps the truth about British Columbia hidden from all the rest of Canada, and the Great Firewall of Canada that keeps things like what is going on right now in Burns Lake and Smithers from the eyes of the world. Thank God for the Guardian having somebody there. And it sounds like in those snowmobiles coming, there's satellite phones and satellite uplinks and stuff like this. So the Unistoten will not be alone. And numbers may grow. It's 15 below. That was daytime temperature. 15 below. in the Dakek Wet'suwet'en country around Morristown, which is this area where this is going on, where look up the Morristown Sounds from 27, from December 2017. Yeah, that's what is in the mountains around there. And maybe that's the other reason for the mobilization. Maybe that's the reason the military are there. That's the fact. Because where did the military come from? Where did the Canadian military from? So, Hiawatha Impact, Wet'suwet'en War. Wet'suwet'en War. This is the Wet'suwet'en War. We're in an Indian war in Canada. So, American, please, NASA, Goddard, I'm sorry, fellas, to cross over and back and forth between astronomy, geoastronomy, BC politics. They're hard for me to separate because I see everything at once. That's, remember, I wrote you a crazy letter, right? I see a lot of things all at the same time, and to me, they all overlap and interconnect. And it has to be the landscape here and the landscape of the north and the volcanoes that drove out the Dine. Now, as I know of the events that did it now, I can see the timelines. And so I see the timelines from 12,800. I see the timelines from 6,000, of which what rose and fell and why. What's disappeared, what's underwater, what might else be underwater, like down in the Mekong or the Gulf of Thailand. What else is down there that we never saw before? Now we don't have time or the hydrographical elements. I don't know. I guess maybe we do. Satellite, perhaps. It's an amazing, crazy story. Eh? But NASA Goddard, you see, when you have a complex planet, it touches all other things off. As an augurer, I can tell you because I sort of know what augury was that the Romans had. You studied things that were in the sky, and it's also the basis of Iran too, and the teachings from Iran that were Euclid and Pythagoras and the mathematics that you use came from. They didn't come from Sumer, you guys. They came from Iran. They came from Upper Chaldea, not Lower Chaldea, which is Sumer, Antalya is, and the terrible Battle of Carhae when a Roman emperor was taken captive in slavery. Carhae. So, America, you're at your Carhae, I think, by the way. I won't get into your American politics right now. You guys are all military, and a lot of you are. And you're all loyal patriots to your country, I know. But yeah, watch geopolitical videos just for fun as to my opinions about what events are in our history and years concerning my province. And that's the previous video to this one. But I wanted to do this Hiawatha, another further thing on the coal, because I was listening again and there's more in there. So I'm gonna have to remember to come back and link the guy who I was watching in my comments or in the description so that you can go have a look. But it's one of those things in the Kolbrin. And he starts bringing Velikovsky. Velikovsky needs another look at what he had to say. He may have the astronomy wrong as to which planet did what and so on and everything, but and that comment I had about the sky turning on its side and the orbit changing, so that's the idea that it's 360 degrees to 364, the change in the orbit. Also pushes it farther out, you think it cooler a little bit, but no, we still have the melted Laurentian ice cap, so. But there are definite, clear literary evidence. We have literary evidence of 12,800, or memory of it. We have literary evidence of 6,000 BC, or memory of it. We have all kinds of memory of that one. The partial flood that covered part of the world, which was when the Laurentian ice sheet melted, Lake Agassiz let go, whatever melted Lake Agassiz, and maybe we got grazed by a comet. So somebody please have a look at the ephemeris about that. Same as there's other things like that. I think of the dates. Oh, check that, And like I say about the mouth of the Mekong, where's the old mouth of the Mekong? What's down there? Because rice cultivation appeared in 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, in the Mekong, Upper Mekong. But where did it come from? Where were all the people before that? Well, there's 200 meters of sea level below that, and that's like all of that basin. And yeah, I'm just astonished. How much it's the same with the Gulf of Mexico, right? Humanity was everywhere. I mean, Mexico was very populous. Caribbean was very populous, very, very populous, and the Spanish did their fuck up shit with it. And this was very populous before the mortalities and the Great Plague, the smallpox of 62 and the one since. This was very populous here. It might have been as many people living in the mainland as are living in it now, just more efficiently, and without need for cell phones and hydro dams and cars. Probably not that many, but it's conceivable that the population of North America is very high. And then the case of the Morristown thing, where the Unistoten blockade is going on, the Morristown Howl, it's either that one. I think is I'm listening to it. They're having sex, Sasquatch, right? they're off in the mountains, and we now actually have a law in BC. I saw BC Forest Service posting about a Sasquatch notice, do not alarm them. I'm gonna have to post it on my Facebook. It's funny, I'll post it on here too. It's funny because it has to be true, because there's a reason the forest industry doesn't want people going out into the woods, and why the timber supply areas were closed to people. There was things living out there that didn't want them in, and there was all kinds of equipment that got damaged. So I'm not saying they understood and they get them done. They're part of the conspiracy with the Sasquatch, but I'd say the Sasquatch are watching all this with great interest. There's another subject that I mentioned, and the legitimate science guy. I'm going to turn this guy off now. No, you got to listen through it too. I'm just finishing it up. The reality is they have their own business in the world. They don't really care what we do. They don't like us. Look at them fuck around. Even the Indians, they don't like that much. They don't like white men at all. There's known to be like this. The same with the Kushtaka or in Alaska, who are something different. Gurum and Washington, they're all different. There's all little categories. They had to hide. They're older than we are. They're smarter than we are. They don't like us. Anyway, so that's the crazy part. That's the crazy part. But with the Gizmden and the Woodfoot and the hereditary chiefs of the Woodfoot, and I had a post. I said they need air support, and they need the international media to come in there. Not just right now. I don't who reported on from the Guardian. The South China Morning Post needs to be in there. Young needs to go in there because it's a Chinese project. See, the point about that blockade is that the China and Canada have this treaty that Harper signed that makes it necessary. All means necessary were used to enforce any company that has 1% China or more Chinese interest in it, which applies to the Trans-Canada LNG pipeline to Kitimat and the Kitimat project itself. So China FIPA applies, and the federal government is applied. This might not be under Horgan's direction. The federal government is obliged to apply armed force. All means necessary in diplomatic jargon means all. You military guys in NASA, you know this. It means any means necessary. It means anything from subterfuge to overt armed action. Yeah, well, that's what we're getting. Again. And although this time the Treaty with China, it didn't need to take the Treaty with China to do this. This is how Canada has always dealt with the First Nations. They dealt with it at Batoche and at Duck Lake and at Oka and Lustigurge or whatever it's called out in the Maritimes where the fucking thing is on. And they do it all the time. This is how the Mounties operate. They are a police force of repression run by the Canadian government in order to enforce the resource extraction capitalism which keeps the white population in those areas in place and who voted for the referendum, but there's only 10%, 12% of the electorate voted because the natives in the region don't vote, and they are the majority other than the resource population and the social workers and the police. The natives are the predominant population north of I call it the thin white line, the belt of the Trans-Canada, the settled region along the American border. North of that, this is the Great Red North. So America, remember that when I'm talking to you back to the Hiawatha again. Because that's what I started to talk about. And what I wanted to talk about was, please, NASA Goddard again, this is to you guys. This was addressed to you in the start by talking to you. Please get some of your guys to start looking through the Kolbrin, look through the Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, the Mahabharata. Start looking even at the, and start thinking about the Voluspa and different things that are said about the creation of the world that Snorri from the oral tradition wrote down. And start listening to the native legends. I know the seashell, for example, talk about the withdrawal of the ice in their inlets. And among the Slathian, where I'm from, at Shalath, is in Mrs. Edwards' book, Irene Edwards' Tales from Short Portage, Seton Portage now. Your Pavilion, talk to you guys who go to Pavilion for the xenobiology stuff at Pavilion. The NASA Goddard guys, get a hold of them. Speaking of NASA Goddard again, go get the guys from xenobiology and get them to go and get Mrs. Edwards' book. And she says, in the old days, the mountains were closer together, and the goats and the sheep could leap from mountain to mountain. Animals could leap from mountain to mountain. From mountain range to mountain range. Yeah, well, Seton Valley is pretty spectacular, and it was filled with ice at one time. But also the Bridge Canyon was, when it to melt, I don't know. That's a curious question because the Rexmount Bluffs near Marsh Lake are tough. They're volcanic ejecta. It's a stacked up. It's been eroded. They look like columns, but they're soft kind of. You can't climb them. And they're nicely red in the sun and the sunlight. But the evening sun there can be red, and it's usually red anyway. But anyway, they're near the head of the Bridge River Canyon, which is this very narrow Yosemite-like twisting S curve through the Shulap Range, dividing it from Mission Ridge. And all the rock is like super shallow because of the stresses of the glacier that was pushed against the bridge glacier, pushed against the Shulap's range and shattered it, and just so much stress, and then the water broke it. I don't know how it got with the S curve thing, just the way the crystal pattern went in the rock, right? But right there, from peak to peak, it's less than half a mile. It didn't take much. You wouldn't need much ice to bound from range to range over the top of the ice. So they remembered, Slattery Myth remembers the noon attacks. It also remembers the retreat of the Place Glacier, which, by the way, disappeared last spring. It finally melted away completely. It was a major glacier, and it's sort of part of the tourist trip along the BC rail line for many years. It's gone completely now. It died in last spring's floods. The climate change is changing, and the tarns at Joffrey are not what they were. The ice falls at Joffrey are completely gone for what they were when I stopped by there in 1983. No, 1979 when I went through. I was with the highways crew there when that was long before that was an open highway. It hadn't become a public highway yet. Yeah, so maybe I'm wondering, when did the Bridge Glacier retreat? I'm going to have to find a glaciologist about that. Where was the Bridge Glacier at the time of the Bridge River Cones eruptions, which was put in roughly the same time as Mount Rieger? Now, so of course, this is the thing. Our human history is affected very, very much by planetary geology and tectonics and volcanics. We know this now. And we know about droughts and all that stuff and climate change, we know. But now the whole issue of asteroidal impacts and meteor impacts now becomes a meteor bypass. Meteors bypass flies into the realm of fate, which I heard an interesting, exactly what I knew it to be, and it's somewhere it says it, and apparently it was in the Kolbrin, that fate is something you can't change. It includes things like luck, but destiny is something that you can't avoid. Something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting philosophy in the Kolbrin too, but there's a lot of, if it's legitimate, and it would seem to be from what it's having to say about the ancient world, especially the Egyptian account that it gives, is very credible to me. I'll hear it, and it makes a lot of sense. But then when they get into the stories of the creation and the two different destructions of the earth, and then you compare it to the Popol Vuh of the Maya, and you look at the cycles of the world. Also in the Norse world, the nine worlds were to be destroyed and reborn. It had been so before, I think, also. We don't know about the Norse cosmogony much because, well, they were all killed. All the sages, all the Odin go there, and the Freyrs go there, and the Tyrs go there. They were all slaughtered. And the true believers either leapt off cliffs or sailed the seas, or went converted. Political reasons, money, marriage, founded Russia. Yeah, the Vikings did a lot. The Vikings were the true European civilization of the Middle Ages, no matter what the Holy Roman Empire likes to think of itself. The heirs of the Holy Roman Empire being. It's a long, strange world, and scientists often don't study enough history so that when they come across something like the Hiawatha, they don't know what else there is to know about it right away. So that's why I wrote and asked Goddard a letter a while ago, trying to explain the kind of mind I have and the kind of education I have and how I operate my mind. Like I'm trying to do it right now. Is I just know a lot of things that just all fit together, and it's like Sherlock Holmes, Occam's razor applies. Right? There's so much data, fellas. So start reading the Kolbrin and the Book of Enoch, whatever else you can find like that. Start considering all the possibilities and read through Lewis Spence's Encyclopedia of the Occult. I know it sounds all really strange, and find the Book of Hermes Trismegistus. Some of you guys may have already read that stuff because of Euclid and everything else like that. And I haven't read. There's, who else was influenced by Haran was Heraclitus, another vegetarian. I've just gone vegetarian. Pythagoras, of course, was vegetarian, and it seems Haran was vegetarian. This is where grains were first cultivated. And it sounds like in the Kolbrin that the animals that were, when they were all pushed up together there against the mountain, they said they were all pushed up with the animals of the field. But there wasn't domestication yet. They couldn't have been their own flocks. So maybe this was what began the process of domestication of livestock. Dogs, I'm certain we were already long-time friends with. But certain animals that we were pushed together with for the first time. And maybe that's when people started herding goats. I'm not sure when grazing started, but it didn't take long for the grazing to empty the Sahara and Arabia and the Taklamakan and other areas that are just now desert, including the American West. Grazing is so destructive. Industry is just as bad, only worse. And Goethe parable, I'm closing, I'm just say, you guys, NASA, go read. Randall Jarrell's a great American poet. His master was Robinson Jeffers, whose master was Whitman. He has a translation before he died, only of the first volume of Goethe's Faust. His wife has the rest of the notes on the second, but the first volume of Faust, and it's all about the deal done by engineering and money, and banking and commerce, with the devil, in order to win the love of woman and control and of power in the world, and that it would destroy creation. And this was Mephistopheles' mission, was to harm the soul of mankind as well as to harm the creation of God. So you guys are in charge of this research. And like I said, you need a research like me. And like I said, it'd be nice to get paid for what I'm trying to provide for you. But if you're not going to pay me, that's fine, because I was told to give my knowledge away for free, and I'm giving it to you. I'm not a crazy man. I'm not like the other videos on this that might mention the title of the Kolbrin Bible or things like the Sasquatch. I'm not them. I understand things. I understand what you understand about science and knowledge of what you're talking about. And I think we now have a firm date for human history at 12,800. And there's indications, according to the things that are under Egypt and elsewhere, that human history is more like 25, 30,000 years old. Into the Ice Age. Because the Ice Age, we always think, like North Americans, don't we, that the Ice Age covered everything. Well, it didn't even cover the southern United States. Which, remember, Florida and Cuba were joined. You have to remember how much bigger things are when you talk about ancient times and stuff like that. People always omit where the oceans were different, where the landscape was different when they look back in human history and they talk about it's not just the land bridge, it's everything. You have to get out of your own memory geography. And this also applies to political geography, like what's going on Bird Lake right now. I don't know where that'll be by morning. We're coming up on an hour. I only meant to do 20 minutes. And I got to get some music playing in. I wonder if I will. I'm going to speak this so I can. Have a pleasant evening. I'm Mike Clevin. I'm the professor. I don't have a degree. I just know too goddamn much. Right? So, and I was told, by the who gives it to me, the knowledge that I know comes from everything I've read, everything I've known to read since I was a child, and watch and learn and think. And I think like a Socratic. And I'm just telling you what I see. I'm like Stormcrow Gandalf, telling you the not just a measure of bad news. Not just I'm in marvel at all of it actually. You have a very pleasant evening. This is Big One, Skookum One, Mike Clevin. Big Skookum One, Mike Clevin, and a big man signing out. Oh shit! I wanted to make a minute. It's a minute and 5 seconds. Good night.